in this lesson, we'll learn how to create custom parameters in Max. In Max, we can control a parameter by another parameter's value by either using an expression or simply wiring those parameters together. And we're going to get into those topics very shortly, but what's great is that we can create our own parameters if we like. So let's go ahead and learn how to do that, because we're going to want the ability to, let's say, control things like our idle speed or even engine rotation. So those are a few attributes we're going to set up for this pod racer to really bring it to life and give the animator a lot of control in the process. Alright, so what I'd like to do is create an attribute holder first, and here's the benefit of working with an attribute holder. Let's head over to our modify panel, and let's say we choose one of our engine controls. Notice we have a lot of parameters to deal with by just initially selecting this control and checking out everything under the modify panel rollout. Now, what's great about the attribute holder is it adds just a level that is clean that we can use to add our custom attributes to, so we don't have to worry about all of these rollouts we see here and the parameters that come along with them. So let's go ahead and learn how to work with an attribute holder, and then we'll go ahead and create our custom parameter tied to that attribute holder. Alright, so starting with both engines, if we were to select them both and go ahead and head over to our modifier list, I have both controls selected, we can press the A key. That's a quick way to filter out our modifier so we can get to the one we need to. Okay, so here it is, the attribute holder, second one in the object space modifiers list. Alright, now with both of these selected, you'll see that our attribute holder is italicized. What this means is that they are instants. So when we create a custom parameter, one parameter is actually tied to both objects. Alright, so that's what that means. So you may not want to select both of your engines and add the attribute holder that way. In our case, it will work, but a lot of times you just want to give the animator a lot of control. So what that means is that when we go ahead and build our engine rotation parameter that will control the rotation of both engines simultaneously, you may want to then consider breaking up that connection and just creating a custom parameter, a separate custom parameter for each engine. That way you can have separate control over the rotation of each engine for creating things like offsets in your animation to make it look more natural. Alright, but for this demonstration we're actually going to go ahead and use an instance attribute holder. But if I were to undo that, let me go ahead and show you some other things with the attribute holder. So if we want to go ahead and, let's say, just create a quick copy of an attribute holder, we can select one of our controls, head over back to our modifier list, I'll go ahead and choose the attribute holder, and notice we can go ahead and drag and drop on top of the object we'd like to clone this attribute holder to. Notice it's not italicized, meaning that they share two different connections. Now, ideally what we'd want is to first create our custom parameter tied to this attribute holder and then clone this attribute holder to the other engine. Okay, so if you know that you're building custom attributes that are going to basically have the same functionality, but that functionality is going to have separate control on that certain object, you can go ahead and create that custom parameter and then drag and drop. So I'll show you what I'm talking about here. If I were to go ahead and just remove these attribute holders, okay, I've just undid the other, and I'll go ahead and leave this one on the right engine just so we can create this custom parameter, and then we'll go ahead and learn how to clone that over. And then by the end of the lesson, we're going to want to make sure that they're both instants so that as we control one parameter, we're controlling the rotation of both engines. Okay, so with the attribute holder now in place, you can see how our modifier list is cleaned out. So we can go ahead and very easily now add our custom parameters without any other distractions. So to do this, we now want to head over to the animation drop-down, and then from there here's where we can go ahead and create a new parameter. Alright, so that's the parameter editor, and here's the hotkey, Alt-1. Okay, so what we want to basically do is create a float parameter. This will give us a lot of control over the rotation of our engine, because we're working with something even as small as decimal values with float. Whereas with something like integer, dealing with whole numbers, you start to lose that finer control that you'd get with float. So we're going to go ahead and work with a float attribute. Okay, from here we can go ahead and name this parameter. I'm going to go ahead and call this engine underscore rotation. Alright, I'd also like to bring your attention to the drop down right above the name text box. Notice we have the option of choosing the display of our parameter control. I like to leave it at spinner, that we can type in the values, but you can choose slider if you like, whichever works best for you, but I find that spinner works great. We can increase or decrease the size of our parameter. Now what's great about this is we have this testing attribute. So if you were to go to the very bottom of this list, you can see a quick example of how your parameter is going to look when it's applied to the your modifier panel underneath the attribute holder. Okay, so we can always decrease the size to, let's say, 100, and you can see how that updates the testing attribute. Alright, so from here, our range, I like to use a great range just so that the animator again has a lot of control. So I'm going to make the minimum -360 and the maximum +360. From there we can go ahead and choose add, and notice this custom attribute has been added to the modifier panel connected to our engine control. Okay, great. Now let's say if we wanted to either rename this parameter or remove it altogether. Okay, and we close out this dialog. What we can do is head right back to that same dialog. So I like how Max keeps things in just one place for us. So with the object selected, I'll just press the hotkey Alt-1. I like to use that. It's a quick way to get to this dialog. So from there we can go ahead and choose Edit, Delete. Now notice, automatically we have our engine rotation selected. If we had multiple parameters, then we'd have to scroll down the list. Alright, so from here, notice those attributes that we have defined in this parameter, they're going to be tied now to our parameter editor. Alright, so here's where we can go ahead and change the name. I'll just go ahead and misspell this, blah blah blah. Alright, and now maybe we even determine a new max size. I'll go ahead and change this to, let's say, 45. Now what's very important is for these changes to be saved, we have to choose Apply Changes. Now notice there is our newly named attribute, which we will not go with. Alright, so let's go ahead and change this. We know that our max was 360. We know that we spelled engine wrong, so we'll go ahead and rename that. There we go. Alright, and again what we need to do is choose Apply Changes. Once that has been done, everything's back to normal. Okay, great. And to delete the parameters, you simply choose Delete Parameter or Delete All Parameters and apply the changes. Great, so I'm going to go ahead and close this out now. I'll show you how to clone this. So watch this. We can go ahead and take this attribute holder now and drag that to the left engine. And not only does this left engine have a new attribute holder, but it also has its own unique engine rotation. Okay, notice I can change the value on this, but it's going to be different from the right control. Alright, great. So I'm going to go ahead now and take that attribute holder and trash it. Okay, I'll go ahead and do the same for the right side. Okay, great. Alright, so now let's go ahead and select both of our controls, and let's go ahead and create a new attribute holder. Now if you like, you can go ahead and rename this. You can right click, choose rename, and call this engine underscore params, or parameters for short. Okay, from there we can go ahead now and just create our custom parameter. So notice I have the right engine control selected. I'll press Control 1. We'll go ahead and name this engine rotation. Our minimum was negative 360. Our maximum was positive 360. And let's see, that should be it. We can now go ahead and choose add. And there we have it. So notice, if I were to go ahead and select the left engine control, we have the engine rotation. And notice if I change the value here, it's going to be the same value on the right side because they're both connected. Great, so we've learned how to create custom parameters. We've also learned about the benefit of working with attribute holders. You don't have to use them, but I would recommend them. They just simply remove that clutter in the modifier panel. Alright, we've learned how to edit and even delete our custom parameters if we need to. So with that now all said and done, let's say we move over to the next lesson where we will now start to wire parameters together to get this engine rotation parameter actually controlling something.